Hi, my name is Brianna LaCates. This is a history of the world from Delaware, and today we're going to talk about the Industrial Revolution and the ship's chronometer. The Industrial Revolution took place during the high modern era, starting in England from the late 18th century through the 19th century, and it completely changed the way people lived. Inventions were being created that could make products quicker than ever, and companies could hire people to work for them in large factories and profit way more. Because of this, people started living more in urban areas, started working more in factories and on farms, and started relying on time more as a way to keep track of when they needed to work. This last one about time is how the object we're talking about today came to be. The object is called the ship's chronometer and was used as a way to tell where ships were in the world. Before the chronometer, captains would be off on where they were because clocks on the ships would move around with the bouncing from the waves, and clocks were essential to knowing location. With these new chronometers, the clock would be in the middle on a rotating circular bar so that when the ship moved around, the bar would swivel and the clock would stay horizontal. They would set the time to what it was in Greenwich, England, and could tell the time wherever they were because of where the sun was. An hour is equal to the sun moving 1/24th of the way around the earth, and 1/24th of the earth's circumference is 15 degrees. So they would know that if their time was 3 hours behind Greenwich, that they would be 45 degrees out and in the middle of the Atlantic. Now, this particular chronometer was one that was aboard Charles Darwin's ship, the guy who traveled to the Galapagos and discovered evolution. It is circular in shape and gold in a square box that is green on the inside and made of wood on the outside. This object is a great representation of how the Industrial Revolution altered the world. When it was being used globally, every ship was going by Greenwich time and created, as a first in history, a global time that everyone agreed on. This made it easier for industrial workers to tell time being on one schedule. Also, it was because of inventions like this that the Industrial Revolution had become as important as it was to the world because it just made everything faster and sometimes easier. This great chronometer, while it may not seem like it, has affected us in our era today. As mentioned before, it created a universal time that we now know as GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time. Without this, traveling abroad or maybe even to the next state would be hard because the time differences would be all over the place. Also, again, as mentioned before, this chronometer helped Charles Darwin get to the Galapagos and make his observations on evolution. This changed the way the world saw time because suddenly the world was much older and much different than they had previously assumed, just with their religion. Mountains that they thought had always been there were once under the sea, and the earth they had found out was millions of years old. We may not have known this today, or we might, but not as early on as we had, if it had not been for Charles Darwin and his chronometer. It's also clear to see that people then had just as much of a will for learning and improving how we live our lives as we do now. With all the new inventions coming up, people were looking for ways to get around the obstacles faced so that life could be more enjoyable, and we still do this now, especially with things such as our electronic gadgets. Well, that's all I have. Thanks for watching.